Hello there, children.
Hey, Chef.
How's it going?
Good.
Well, how about I meet you boys after work and we can
Talk app monetization.
Excuse me?
So, this is my talk. It's kind of sad, but I really enjoy watching South Park, even though it's been a really long time since I was probably the appropriate age to watch it, which was probably the inappropriate age. But most of the things I learned about business, I learned from South Park, or a lot of them at least. And we'll see if you guys get anything out of this. Hopefully you will. This is all the code I'm going to have in the whole talk. So basically, it's really bad code. I'm just going to talk, and if I get tired of talking, then we'll watch a South Park clip. And it's really bad because I've got some like control flow by exception handling, which is never a good idea. Don't do it in your code. But if we want to run out of clips, looks like everybody's just going to have to go to the bar at the end. So hopefully you guys are game for that, if you're of age. So let's get into the talk. So I'm Alex Argo. You can find me on Twitter. I'm co-founder of A-Star Software. The two other guys who are my co-founders are back there too, Dan and Raj. So maybe they'll be able to help where I forget things or something like that. Why should you care what I have to say about app monetization? We're doing it. We're supporting ourselves. We were founded in 2009. We've got 3 full-time people, us, and then we've got a couple of part-time people helping out. So our apps are doing enough to at least support us, and a little bit more. We're not Rovio though, or King, or Machine Zone, who makes Game of War. So we're not super crazy like that in terms of how much money we're making. But we weren't always supporting ourselves through our apps. It was kind of a gradual thing. And when we started, let's see here. When we started, our business plan was kind of like the Underpants Gnomes. If you've seen it from South Park.
Report on the gnomes. What
go.
gnomes? The underpants gnomes. The little guys that come in your room late at night and steal your underpants. So that's where my underpants go. Underpants? Will you stop with the underpants gnomes, Tweak? We have to work here. What the hell? Where I began. That's my last pair of underpants! Alright, dude, why are you taking Tweak's underpants?
Silly underpants, big business.
Business? Wait, do you know anything about business?
Sure, that's what gnomes do.
Show us.
Okay, follow me. Not much longer now. This is where all our work is done.
So what are you gonna do with all these underpants that you steal?
Collecting underpants is just phase 1. Phase 1, collect underpants.
So what's phase 2?
Hey, what's phase 2? Phase 1, we collect underpants. Yeah, but what about phase 2? Well, phase 3 is profit, get it?
I don't get it.
You see, phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit.
Oh, I get it. No, you don't.
So that was pretty much our plan. We thought it'd be cool to make some apps, and we were just kind of going to see where it took us. We saw, or at least personally, I saw the Apple keynotes with the guy who was working at the insurance company, which I did at the time, and he quit his job, made a bunch of money off the App Store and retired or whatever. So that seemed like a good idea. So when we started off, we were like, all right, let's just make an app and see what happens. So our first app was called Deadbeats. It was really bad. It was basically a thing to track who owed you money, deadbeats. And you can see our very stylish picker controller to enter money. This is, of course, the best UI for entering money. And actually, when we started off, it was only like 3 digits long, and I decided that that wasn't enough because I wanted people who owed me even more money, so I had to add another couple digits on that and make it even more usable. But as you can imagine, this app didn't really go anywhere. We made it initially in like one evening, I think, and then we tweaked it a little bit. So that didn't work, so we tried something new. We made another app called iEyes. If any of you guys use Linux a bunch or have back in the day, it was kind of like the X-Eyes app, where it's a X app where there's little eyes that follow your mouse pointer around the screen. It wasn't very complicated, but we were just like, we'll see what happens. And let's see. This logo may look familiar to you. This is the old Oculus Rift logo. I think that's why they just changed their logo to this, is because they thought they might get into trouble with us suing them. I'm not sure. But you guys probably will make more successful apps when you start off, but our first 2 were not very good. So after that, we decided, all right, let's make a real substantial app. So we loved playing euchre, so we decided we were gonna make a card game. Let's see here. So in our first year, we made an app. It took about 6 months to get ready for the App Store. Does that sound right, you guys? Something like that. And you can see we started off not doing very many units. So we were like, we started off with a paid app, because back then in the App Store, your option was paid or free. There was no get button. There was no in-app purchase or anything like that. So we chugged along for a while, and we were like, let's try some things. I think you can see in here we had a Christmas spike when lots of things happened, and we also experimented a little bit with like making it free for a day, and that didn't really seem to help us that much. So then we were like, all right, let's make a free version with ads, because that was a thing that people were starting to do then. So you can see we did that, and it was way more popular than our paid app. Yep. So year 2, if you note, the axis has gone up a bunch from the first year. So we're doing 10,000 a month to start off with, and free is the blue. It's still doing really good, but we were like, okay, well, we like euchre. Let's make some more apps. So, oops, wrong way. So then we came out with hearts. You can see this little sliver right here is the paid hearts again, and then this is a free app with ads. And then we added our first in-app purchase in year 2, because those were actually a new thing, and it was to remove ads from our euchre app. And that actually scared us off from doing in-app purchases for a while, because either later that year or the next year we got sued by a patent troll named Lodsys. And we took the very wise strategy of acting like we never got their letter. So probably if you have something similar, consult your lawyer. I maybe wouldn't recommend doing what we did, but it worked out for us. I think as of this last year, Lodsys is now defunct as a company. But it really scared us from using in-app purchases for a while. We came out with our free version of Hearts. You can see how it jumped up. Then we did Spades, year 3. And the really surprising thing to us was this sliver right here is our free Spades app, and you can tell in its first month it was our most popular app by downloads for the month. And that was something we didn't expect, although I think what we figured out in retrospect is that it's more of a game that's played throughout the country as opposed to euchre and Hearts, which are more regional. the Mac Store was introduced this year as well, and I think there's some slivers around here where we introduced the Mac apps, which we haven't really done much with because they didn't sell much. Didn't really make a dent in our sale, which is why you can't really see them. So maybe Mac apps aren't a good way to get lots of money now. And I guess year 4 to 6 at this point, around here we're doing pretty well. We've got lots of downloads. We've got ads, so we're all full time. Dan and Raj went full time first. They both kind of had some other gigs supporting them, and then I finally joined them. But you can tell a little bit last year the app ecosystem has, at least downloads, have slowed down a bunch because there's a lot of competition. But things have been doing pretty well for us. So let's see here. We were trying to figure out what to do next in 2014, and we weren't really sure what to do. So first we decided to turn to South Park and see what they recommended we do. So in 2014, they've gotten a little more sophisticated too. They have a new plan. There's way more points than their 4-point plan, or their 3-point plan. It's actually 4 now. So
Remember our company plan, guys. Start up, cash in, sell out, bro down.
So seems like a good idea, but it didn't really work for our apps. We weren't really good at selling out and broing down. So, all right, let's try something else. So we were like, we've got a bunch of iOS apps. There's lots of people doing Android or buying Android phones, so we made an Android app. We ported Euchre, our first app, to Android. And there's all these flames and stuff because I first did this talk for the Android group. But that's probably not as exciting here because we all like iOS and that's where all the money is. But we kind of took a different approach with Android. We had to actually promote our app. This is just a free app. We didn't think it made much sense to make a paid app on Android because even less than on iOS do people buy apps there. You can see we have a big spike at the beginning because we were paying for ads for our app. So we knew just kind of from our other experience that people don't just magically find apps anymore like they did in 2009. So we did some paying for apps you can see here. And then around here, I think we may have tried again. That also may be like the Christmas spike. But you can tell our units are somewhat similar to, or a little better even than our initial launch on iOS back 3 years ago. So I think we're kind of waiting to see how Android turns out, and we're hoping it'll kind of build on itself like iOS has. But what about you guys? You're making apps, and there's this really cool report that Flurry came out with. They're an analytics company that got bought by Yahoo, and they released this guide for how to monetize apps. So they've got these quadrants, which kind of separate apps by frequency of use and retention over 90 days. So you can see, like in quadrant 1, the high frequency, high retention apps are your things you're in every day, and you use a bunch, like your communication apps, your news apps. Sometimes social networking gets close to there. You've got quadrant 2, which are very frequent, high intense usage, like dating apps, social games, but you don't keep using them for a long time because I guess a dating app, if you accomplish the goal of the app, you're probably not using it anymore, right? So quadrant 3, we have the low frequency, low retention, which is probably not a good place to be in, but there are ways to monetize those. And then we have quadrant 4 with kind of high retention, lower frequency. We'll talk about each of them individually. So subscription and advertising are really good for quadrants 1 and 4 because you have high retention. That means more ad impressions or more subscription revenue. And this is what we do for the majority of our money. And I'll say it is really nice to just be going to sleep at bed and know once you've woken up the next morning, you made some more money. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but it's really nice. But another nice thing is it encourages you to kind of keep improving your apps and keep people coming back, as opposed to maybe some of the other pressures that you may be on if you have a different type of monetization for your app, which maybe we'll talk about later. We've got our one-time purchase section over here. You don't really want to do recurring revenue like ads or subscriptions because people use them and they get rid of them. That's why a lot of the dating apps have kind of gone to the in-app purchase type model, and it's also good for like photo apps. James does really well with his photo apps, and I think that's exactly the right way to monetize those. We also have in-app purchase. So in Quadrant 4, people keep coming back. You can have them buy extra things, like more levels for your single-player game, more opportunity to add additional content. And then Quadrant 2, since they're using it so intensely, that's where you really get them with in-app purchases as well, kind of with free-to-play games or the dating app example I mentioned before. Now we've kind of experimented with in-app purchases. I mentioned our remove ads in-app purchase, and we've messed around with some in our multiplayer portion of our app, but we're really not big experts on freemium games. But luckily, the Canadian Department of Mobile Gaming is, and they're going to tell you a little about it right now.
You've seen through the charade, so you might as well know everything. Charade up! Allow me to explain the science behind micropay freemium gaming. For years, the concept behind gaming was simple. You pay for the game and you enjoy. With mobile apps, we now have the ability to make games that are boring and stupid. But if you pay for incentives, you're rewarded.
Freemium. The meum is Latin for not really.
It's a simple cycle, a never-ending loop based on RPGs. Explore, collect, spend, improve. But whereas those just use the concept of XP or experience points, we've introduced the idea of micro-paying with money. Money, 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 money.
It's what everyone is doing. Freemium games are what's now, and it's all just a lot of harmless fun.
The Terrence and Phillip mobile game. In this game, you are Terrence and Phillip. Can you collect all the Canadian coins? That's one coin. Can you collect more? You've collected 10 Canadian coins. Congratulations. Hey, you're really good at this, guy.
What? Congratulations, Cal.
With Canada coins, you can buy stuff and help Terrence and Phillip rebuild Canada. Run around and collect more coins, or better yet, buy them in bulk. How many Canadian coins would you like to buy?
This is stupid. Well, it's just 49 cents for the cheapest one.
You bought 200 Canadian coins for 49 cents. You're amazing. Now use that Canada to help rebuild Canada. Click to build a hospital here.
Yay! It's still stupid, and now I paid 49 cents for it.
And so in conclusion, the successful freemium game is based on 5 principles. Entice the player with a simple game loop. Use lots of flashing cha-chings and compliments to make the player feel good about themselves. Train the players to spend your fake currency. Offer the players a way to spend real currency for your fake currency.
So they'll forget they're spending money.
And make the game about waiting. But let the player pay not to wait. It's a surefire way to make lots of money.
We understand micropaying, but can't the game hidden inside the charade just at least be fun?
No. It has to be just barely fun. If the game was too fun, then there would be no reason to micropay in order to make it more fun. What's this?
Your checks, of course, for 10 million American dollars each.
So this is... everyone is doing this? Everyone everyone is doing it.
It's just the way things are going.
It's the way things are going. Well, I guess if everyone's just paying 40 cents at a time, it can't be that bad.
So that's about the extent of our understanding of freemium games. There's some good games out there, but they tend to be a little bit questionable in how they take advantage of people. But I think it's still a valid way to monetize because there, like I said, there are still lots of good stuff out there. So if you're making an app, what should you do? Well, this is kind of the money slide for me, especially if you're making like a single-player game or something like that. This is from App Annie and IDC Mobile Ad Advertising and Monetization Trends report for 2013 to 2018. This is some of their predictions. But, I mean, you can already tell, looks like in-app purchase and freemium are going up, and paid medium are not doing so well. But there are, like I said, some ways you can make money off of that. And maybe James can tell us some hints about that later on. I don't know. But he seems to be doing all right. So in just looking at an example from us, I took our last month of revenue and broke it out. The blue part is what we get from ads. And then this little sliver here, 2%, is from one-time purchases. So those are paying for our paid apps or the in-app purchase to remove ads or our multiplayer stuff, which we haven't really done much for. So I think from here it probably makes sense to talk a little bit about how all this ad stuff works, since you may want to try out ads in your apps. So we'll start with a little bit of terminology. A request in ad terminology is when you say, hey, I have a spot to put an ad, can I put one here? An impression is when one actually comes back. So when you say I want an ad here, you don't always get one. And if you look at the rate of when you actually get one to not, that's called your fill rate. And even though we're doing mobile apps where people tap on things, all the ad networks and their dashboards and stuff still call like actually interacting with an ad a click. So that's what we'll call it. And then they have a click-through rate, which is how often an ad gets clicked on. They're normally like, in the very low percents, even parts of a percent. And then one that's pretty important is called eCPM. I want to talk about that a little more in depth. So that's basically the rate you get for all of your ads that you're serving up. So here's an example. It's basically your ad rate per 1,000 impressions. So if you have an eCPM of $2 and you have 1 million impressions, then who's good at math? What is the revenue you get from that? Anyone want to venture a guess?
2,000?
Bingo. So that's how it works. Pretty straightforward. Here's kind of another simple example, like kind of projecting that out for a long period of time. So let's say you got 500 users, 3 sessions, they view like 20 ads per session. You got 15 cent CPM, let's say it's a banner ad or something like that. So in 1 year you get $216. Well, if you start adding some zeros and increasing the rates, it starts to look a little bit better. So I just bumped the users up to 200,000, 35 cent CPM, and I kind of pulled these sessions per week and ad views per sessions numbers out of my butt, so they're not realistic, but this is how you would figure out, like if you have an existing app and you wanted to put ads in it to see how it would perform, to kind of calculate what that could potentially get you. Although one thing that's kind of odd is that the CPM is not something that's just set in stone. It changes all the time. It changes from day to day, and it's even very seasonal. Just to give you an example, here is our revenue for the past, I think, year, our revenue for the past year and their impressions. So you can see their impressions are in blue. This is just from one of our ad networks. And it's fairly solid. It's increasing a bunch like that, but you can see the rates are doing nothing but that. So which is based on the impressions times the eCPM, essentially. So ignore this little dip here. This is when we were having a problem with our ad network doing unsavory things like auto-directing you to the App Store, so we just turned them off for that brief time period until they got things worked out. But you can see at the end of the year, just kind of like with app downloads, the revenue goes up a bunch during like TV sweeps, the holiday season, Black Friday, and one thing that we're really looking forward to this year during campaign season that really rackets up the ad rates because there's lots of people throwing their money at eyeballs. And then you can see we got to the beginning of the year and boom, it dropped off. That's pretty normal. And then you can kind of see through this year, every quarter, it bumps up a little bit and goes back down, bumps up a little bit. And if anyone's worked in a big company, that may kind of seem familiar. You get to the end of the quarter and you're like, well, I have a budget set for this quarter. I can either use all my money in my budget, so they keep giving it to me, or I don't, and they say, oh, well, you got by with this last quarter, so we're not giving you any more money, and that seems to be what happens with ad spend, too. People are like, oh, we need to use up our budget by the end of the quarter, and they just spend lots of money. I think that's, so like I said, there's lots of things that affects the rates and changing frequently, and you kind of need to be prepared for that. See here. So let's talk about the different kinds of ads you can do. You can do banners or leaderboards, which are those kind of little rectangle things at the top or at the bottom of your app. And those typically have like the lowest eCPMs. If you want to really bump up your eCPMs, you do an interstitial, and there's a bunch of different kinds of those too. There's just like a static interstitial, and those don't have as good rates as MRAID, which I always have to look this up, is Mobile Rich Media Ad Interface Definition. It's basically kind of a standard for them to create ads that have animation and video and stuff like that. And then there's just straight up video ads they can be skippable or incentivized, so maybe it's not even in between. Maybe you click your ad to get more of your fake currency or whatever. So those make even more money because people click on them more. And then kind of the newest thing in ads are native ads, which is where it's kind of like product placement in TV or movies, where you basically integrate ad content into your app somehow. So maybe our card backs would have some corporate logo on them, so we would get paid for that. A lot of companies have native ad SDKs where you basically give it a table view controller and you integrate like the image and text they give you, and you basically, like say you have a contact ad, one contact in the middle is going to be Coca-Cola or something like that. And those tend to do really well from what I hear, but we haven't really tried to implement them at all. We did have one company who wanted us to do the card back thing, but we didn't feel like doing all that work, to be honest. So you're like, all right, this ad stuff seems cool. What do I need to do to get it in my app? So first thing you need to do is kind of figure out where you're gonna get the ads in there. And once you've done that, you really want to just start with one ad network. I'd probably recommend, if you're on iOS, maybe just do iAd or maybe AdMob. They're pretty simple to implement. But you get to a point where it makes sense to mediate between different ad networks so you can get more money. So that would be kind of phase 2. And then phase 3 is something that only gigantic companies really really get into. It's like your ESPNs and your Yahoos will only work directly with individual people who want to show ads and make direct deals with them. I'd say we're kind of like in phase 2.5 because we have someone who does some finding ad inventory for us and gets a little bit of a commission, but we're nowhere near like ESPN, who just makes a deal with Coca-Cola and then has ads all over the place.
Alex,
Yep.
is doing mediation, is it that much more difficult than just doing one network these days?
Yes.
It is.
So some companies like AdMob and a company we used a long time ago called MobClicks have this thing where you can just turn on a bunch of different ad networks, but that's not really true mediation. That's just, it does help out. So if you're in a situation where you're just using AdMob and you just want to check all these buttons to get more ad sources, it'll definitely help. So I wouldn't say don't do it, but the big difference is when you're doing that versus like true mediation is that AdMob and the company take a cut, but if you do mediation yourself, that means that you get a direct cut. So what we found is most ad networks also these days have what's called like a real-time bidding platform. There may even be like an open standard for that, but basically people bid on ads, and if they're spending enough money on you, they'll reach out to you directly and say, hey, I think we should set up a direct connection, and then we set that up and kind of deal with that from there. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more right now, though. So when we started, like I kind of mentioned, have an ad request, goes to some network, and then we get a request back, and we throw up our Cheesy Poofs ad on the phone. For us, when we started, that was our one network was called MobClicks, and just a side on them, they were doing really well for us for a little bit. They had what seemed like good rates, and they were paying us, but we got to a point where the payments became kind of more erratic, and eventually the company was bought by someone, and eventually went under, went bankrupt, and all this stuff. So we lost a sizable portion of revenue from them. So I'd say what we learned from that is if you're in that situation, A, get out really fast, and B, get on a debt collector as soon as you can, because it's a really crappy feeling to be like, oh yeah, I got all this money, and then they're like, oh yeah, we'll pay you next week, check's in the mail. And I was calling them every day, so it was super fun. But the nice thing is that we realized, oh, maybe we should not put all of our eggs in one basket. So once we had that experience, we decided to mediate. That's kind of how we found out. And I guess we started that, and we actually started doing even better than we were with MobClicks. And then kind of a weird thing happened. We were running into all sorts of issues like crashes, and people were complaining about ads, and that was happening because we had like 10 native SDKs in our app, which I don't know about you guys, but especially now, whenever I want to add a new dependency to the app, I really make sure it's good, because that's something you have to maintain, something that could break with an OS update or anything like that. So we decided this was no good, but we did find out that pretty much all of these networks, A, B, C, and D, real names, they have their own mediation, kind of like you were talking about, but they have a way to actually hook in, so you're going direct through other ad networks. And so we did this really goofy thing where we had one network which ended up using MoPub, which is owned by Twitter now. But basically, every time a request came in through here, then we were at MoPub and we said, hey, what other networks can we get ads through? Most of the time MoPub won, but we mediated through everyone else. But we could do it server-side instead of with all these native SDKs. And so far, I think that's working out pretty good for us. There's a lot less issues that crop up, but some still do. So if we were to do this over again, we would cut this step out completely, and we would just go straight to MoPub and mediate there. And that's what I would probably recommend once you get to that step. Do MoPub or some other mediation in whatever ad network you choose. Then we get our cheesy poof ad. Yay. One other thing that's kind of interesting is the ad network waterfall. So basically, let's say you have an ad rate. This kind of applies across business, and you're just getting that one ad rate. Your cost, since it's an ad, is 0, so ignore that part. But there's kind of with price segmentation, you're missing out on all the money for the people who will pay higher ad rates, and since your ad rate is set at, let's say, $1, everyone who is willing to pay less than $1, you don't get the money from them, so you kind of lose out on that money. Think of it like if you get a subscription to Consumer Reports, and then you say, all right, I'm done with this. Your subscription was $15. After you cancel, about a week after that, you get an email from them saying, hey, would you like to subscribe for $5? So they get the people who will subscribe for $10, and then they also get the people who subscribe at $5, and they get kind of more of this pieces of the pie. So basically, the waterfall is something that you can set up in almost any ad network where they have mediation. You basically set different ad rates for all these different networks, and then when a request comes in, you go to the first one and say, hey, you'll pay us $5. Will you take that? Yes? All right, we're good. If not, then you go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until you get to the end, and you'll take like 1 cent. And I think that helped us get a more chunk of revenue as well. So I guess that's all there is on that. So I kind of talked about this a little bit, and this could be a whole talk by itself, and I'm not an expert, but if you're going to launch an app today, you need to acquire users somehow. And one way you can do that is you can get featured in Google Play or the App Store, and that's really hard to do, and there's no good way to make sure it happens, even if you make a really awesome app. We were just talking about that before with some people. Even our app's only been like pseudo featured a couple times, but nothing where we needed to provide artwork or any big feature. So we haven't got any users from that. You have to be really big too. So don't count on that. Another way to get users is search. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with App Store optimization, which is kind of the App Store equivalent of SEO, where you use good keywords, make your screenshots and videos good, and good icons, and things that will kind of help your ranks. Although we have noticed, both in Google Play and the App Store, is those are heavily tied to the amount of downloads and ratings you have. So you need to have an app that gets good ratings. So make a good app and find a good way to get ratings. And then you need to have lots of users. So that really helps us out on iOS kind of maintain our search position. And on Android, that's kind of why we did the paying for ads to acquire some users. Another way you can get users is press. That's also a lot of work, and it's really the most effective, I think, when you launch. So you write out to all the bloggers who cover whatever type of app you do, or you find places where people will use your app. So, like I said, this is a lot of work. We haven't had much success with it, but I've heard of other people who have. Then you have ad networks. I kind of talked a little bit about that. One thing that we've noticed is kind of scary about getting users through ad networks, even though that's what we're doing, is there is this like kind of scary cycle of money that happens when you do that. So you have all these companies in Silicon Valley that are venture funded. They use the 4-point plan that we saw earlier from South Park. So they get all this money and they're like, oh, I need users. We're going to pay for ads. And then we get the money from their ads in our apps. And then we go and spend it to acquire more users. And then it's just like money that comes in and it's just getting cycled through the system. And nothing productive is really happening except for users are getting the apps. So it's kind of scary. I'm not sure if something bad's going to happen along the line with kind of some of the companies that are doing this, or some of the companies who get revenue like us from it. But I guess we'll kind of see. I just wanted to wrap up with some of the lessons I've learned. Don't give up right away. Have patience. Like you saw at the beginning, for the first year, we weren't really making that much. We were just doing it in our spare time. You're not always going to have a runaway success right away. Talked about this a little bit earlier. Problem creatives or like ads can be a gigantic pain. If you've worked at a company where you support some type of application and you're on call, this is kind of what happens when you start getting user reports about, oh, I've got this ad and it's crashing my app, or I've got this ad and it's opening the app store, or there's no close button. That happens from time to time, and you kind of have to drop everything and figure out where it's coming from, how to block it, and all that stuff. So those can be a pain. Don't let the ad networks not pay you. I talked about that earlier. Retaining users is hard. So make your apps good. Not sure what to help on there, but I've been looking at, when I was preparing this presentation, I've been looking at lots of numbers, but there's lots and lots more apps on people's phones, so it's harder to get those eyeballs and those like people using your app because there's so much competition. So I don't think it's going to get better. There's just going to be more and more apps. And seriously, don't let those deadbeat ad networks not pay you, because it really sucks. And that's about it. Do I have any questions? No questions?
I've got a couple.
Sure. I see a list.
At
Uh-oh.
the beginning of your talk,
Yes.
about being hunted by a patent troll, was he questioning in-application purchases as a whole?
They had a patent from, I think it was like the 90s or 80s, that basically patented the idea of using a computer system to pay for something and get things in. But essentially, yeah, they claim they had a patent on any in-app purchasing. Both Apple and Google had licensed their patent, but they argued that didn't cover the people who were using their APIs that supported in-app purchasing. And they definitely, how patent trolls work is they sue a bunch of little guys like us and hope that people will just give them money. They probably know they don't have much merit in their patents, but that's kind of how they do business. And eventually, they kind of ran out of money to keep doing that to people. And I think what made it even harder is when they license these patents to Apple and Google, there's like an agreement that says you can't help the little guys defend you. So there is a really long court battle with a bunch of people, and I think eventually like parts of the patent got struck down until they went out of business. But there's lots of other patent trolls for lots of other industries. I know there's a patent troll that has patented like tracking vital signs of people in a computer system. So there's all these like apps for young mothers who are like tracking their breastfeeding and the BMs of their kids and stuff, that people will make an app and then they get sued by a patent troll and they're one person or something and they just take it down because there's nothing they can really do. Does that answer your question?
So is that cleared? Are they going away? Or is that
LODSIS is gone now. There's lots of other patent trolls, and there's lots of companies who are lobbying in Congress to try to get some type of patent reform, but nothing substantial is really.
It's pretty much guaranteed if you have a successful app that's making money or has a lot of traffic, you're going to get sued over a patent at some point, or at least threatened.
Yep.
Go after what looks like money.
Yeah, the only reason they found us was because we showed up in very low in the top grossing list from our remove ads in-app purchase. So this company was basically going down the line in every category and sending threatening letters to everyone who was there. They took a screenshot of your app where you had an in-app purchase and said, you need to give us this fee and call us to settle, or we're suing you. So, and they just had, I'm sure they paid like a bunch of interns to just go through all these apps to do it. So, yeah.
I've had my name listed in about 4 different patent suits. So.
Yeah, when I worked at Kroger, I had my name in one, I think. But yeah, they go after any big company that does anything because there's going to be a patent somewhere on something you do.
Luckily, in those scenarios, I had a company with
Yeah.
lawyers.
Yeah, you let your company deal with it if it's a big company. But if you're like a 3-person shop, you're like, oh man, what do we do? So yeah.
So this method to make money, I think that's also Google the way to make revenue from this ad. I mean, the way you introduce how you guys make money.
This is definitely the way Google would prefer you do it through ads.
Yeah, I mean,
Like ads.
Google is all about the ads. Obviously, they like selling people's data, and for the most part, it's harmless information. But when one company as big as Google gets all that information, then maybe bad things can happen. But
do you get any better rates on your ads if you supply some information about the user, or is it pretty much just blind ad?
yeah, and the reason you get that is because the more information, the better they can target it. So one thing that we tend to not give on our users is their location information, because we don't want to have to prompt the users to give location information. But you'll get a better rate if you supply that, if you supply like demographic information from Facebook, although Facebook probably has some way to track and hook you back to them anyways if you're using their SDK. But yeah, you definitely can get better rates by giving away more information, and we've kind of tried to stay away from doing that.
Do you have any thoughts about the subscriptions? Experience?
I don't have much experience with subscriptions, but they seem to have a lot of the nice things that work well with ads. I mean, they're in the same quadrant, that I was showing you before, the same side of the graph. I don't have much personal experience, but I've heard that they work well for other people.
Yeah. 'Cause I have a feature, I was thinking about adding as an in-app purchase, and I started thinking, I could maybe do this as a subscription.
Yeah.
And then, users can try it for a month. If they like it, they can pay me again.
It seems like it's happening more and more in the App Store because people have realized you can't make a living on a 99-cent thing because there's so many apps out there, unless you have like a well-defined niche who really likes to buy stuff like photo apps. There's lots of people who love taking photography, so that's a really good niche to be in. So if your app has a really good niche like that, then maybe just selling it up front works. But I mean, even saying here you get it for $2 for the year and then they get it every year, that's even better than just $2 one time.
It used to be that Apple was somewhat strict about how you use subscriptions. When it first came out, it was intended for periodicals where you're getting digital content on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like you said, there's more and more apps that are using subscriptions to keep that revenue flowing. A good example of that is AnyList, where you get the premium features if you pay, and you got to keep paying. I think you have a choice whether you want to pay annual or semi-annual. Hulu, Netflix, I think Netflix does as well. I know Hulu does, where you do the subscription model. There's rumors that Apple is going to remove their 30% cut on some of those media apps like that, which they'll be very, very happy with.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Apple really likes their 30% cut, I think.
But the argument in part is that, like with Apple Music versus Spotify, Apple's taking 30% of Spotify's in-app subscription purchase, but they themselves don't have to pay that cost. So Spotify's arguing that it's anti-competitive.
Well, until they have a monopoly, they don't have much of an argument. Maybe they'll get there, but...
Have you ever tried to theme your app like seasonal to build in some novelty circuits? So like a Christmas theme or something?
We've discussed it and thought about it, but we've not done it. Again, for the same reason we do the card backs. It seemed like a lot of work.
Slowing down the deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
When you've done ads, where have you placed ads? Have you done?
So we've used AdMob for ads. We've done Facebook. Have we tried anything else, or is that it? Those are the main two we've used.
We tried, was it Tapjoy?
We may have, we tried Tapjoy for a little bit. I guess we did it enough so we got kind of that ASO bump in Google Play, and then we kind of like, all right, well, we'll put some of the money back into ads just to kind of keep the machine going, kind of like that little circle I was talking about earlier. But it's on our to-do list to kind of figure that out more and maybe do it in a more, I don't know, a better way so that we can track.
Profit-minded way. We're
Yeah,
sure
profit.
that it's worth it for us.
Yeah.
For your ad network stuff, is it on your server when you do the what did you call it?
Mediation?
Mediation, yeah. And then, or is it just on AdMob type of?
So originally it was controlled on our server, and we can still turn some things on and off on our server, but most of it is controlled through MoPub right now. They have a super complicated dashboard to control all this stuff, but yeah, it's all server side, because the less of that you can have in your apps, the better off you are, I think. Less complexity for the win. Anything else? Yeah.
One of the big things, like you said, is getting good app ratings. How have you found to promote getting those app ratings?
Getting good ad ratings?
Yeah, like in the App Store.
Oh, good app ratings. Okay, so there's been a bit of a controversy about this in recent years, but it's kind of died down. But we do prompt for ratings after people have used our app for a certain time. And we haven't really gotten that much complaints from users. I think it may just be because everyone does it and everyone expects it, but if you don't prompt for ratings, you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage, so we feel like we kind of have to. Kind of like trapped, like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, we wait a certain number of days and opens to make sure that they're users who are using the app a bunch, which hopefully means they like it, and then we ask for a rating. Anything else?
That 4-quadrant graph that you put up,
Uh-huh.
where'd you get that data?
It's a blog post from Flurry. They actually have like kind of broken down what the retention is for all those different industries. I'll put a link to it on the Meetup group sometime tomorrow if you want to peruse it yourself.
The follow-up question is, are you going to make these wonderful slides available?
I am recording this thing, so with all the videos and stuff, it's hard to just put the slides out there. So I think the recording is still recording, and we'll try to get that out there too.
Cool, thank you.
I'm assuming there is, but are there rules against incentivizing 5-star reviews? Well, I guess you couldn't. It wouldn't just be just any reviews.
The rule is very vague, and it basically incentivizes or you're not allowed to game the system, I think is something along the lines of how Apple puts it in their guidelines. And I think when you say, give us a 5-star review, is where a lot of times they'll deem that you've crossed the line. Like I said, people haven't really been talking about that much like recently, but there were people doing that and getting away with it and then getting rejected.
Yeah, there was when iOS 8 came out and keyboard extensions were available, there was a keyboard that was available for free, and it would unlock features if it said you had to give it a 5-star review in order to unlock features. But it has literally like 10,000 plus 5-star reviews.
And the funny thing is, they couldn't actually verify it was 5-star reviews. They just know they sent you to the review page and said, okay, here you go. So you could give them 1 star.
I was thinking even like a Game Center achievement. Some people love getting all the achievements of, you gave us a review.
Yeah.
Is that
I think
allowed?
Apple's intentionally vague, A, to kind of protect themselves from situations they haven't thought of. Maybe they haven't thought of that one. And also just so that there's kind of a gray line, so you really have to think about it. You don't know for sure if you're doing the right thing, so that may make you err on the side of caution.
I know there was one game that an Game Center achievement was buy something in-app purchase.
Yeah. We had an achievement, I think it might still be there, to like share the app socially. Is it still there? I thought we had to change it around.
You did spades.
Yeah. I think it's still there. People like getting their achievements though. And I know if you're curious about that's one thing I forgot to put in the kind of user acquisition stuff, but I think James does a lot of work with social media. He has a social media guy who helps him out, and I might pick his brain later, maybe you guys could too, about kind of how that works, but that's probably a good way to get users too. Is it? Or?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, with my photo apps, I have somebody working with like Instagram. I get a lot of activity on Instagram, a lot of photos and effects and everything like that. So you could have a constant output of featured photos and postings.
Well, maybe to add something interesting that Plunder Pirates is doing now is something will show up in the game that if you click on it and view the ad, you get some experience points or fake currency or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're basically rewarding, similar to your question, but related to the ads. By watching the ad, you get rewarded within the game.
And Apple has actually kind of said rewarded advertising is okay. I think just because there are so many companies who are doing it, but that seems to be allowed by the App Store. There was a short time period where they were like blocking people who were doing incentivized ads, but I think maybe the ad companies were like, hey, don't kill us, or whatever, but now it's kind of an accepted thing. You're allowed to have an ad that gives you like some kind of in-game currency or whatever, but you can't like, yeah, I guess that's all I know about it. Well, I'm getting tired of talking, so I have one more South Park clip.
Minister of Mobile Gaming, what's this all about?
All right, you've seen through the charade again. Let me explain how freemium games really work. The truth is, a very small percentage of people who download freemium games ever pay anything for them. It's all about finding the heaviest users and extracting the most amount of cash from them. That's how you get addicts to pay $200 for a game that's not even worth 40 cents. But then all our profits come from people with problems. Don't think about that. Think about all the money. Here, have a bump of coke.
Okay, but we still won't stand for this.
Here is a fact. 80% of alcohol sales are paid for by alcoholics. Using slot machine tactics, freemium games are able to make millions off of an even smaller percentage of mobile gamers.
Oh, God, it just doesn't stop.
Who is this guy?
We're building a new Canada with micropayments from addicts. Who cares? You think the f***ing alcohol industry cares? They don't care that 10% are gonna get addicted. They're counting on it.
So, are you guys ready to go to the bar?